Hi everybody, and welcome to the studio. Hey, today I'm going to be giving you a little mini lesson on painting a marigold in acrylics. So I chose the marigold because it is really a foundational piece in my garden every year. If you come to my garden, you're going to find it planted in most of the pots that I have, and you're going to find it in the cutting garden I have right outside my studio. So it's the flower that I see all summer long when I'm working in the studio. And I choose the marigold because it's got this vintage feel about it. It feels very classic and lovely and charming, but also at the same time very modern because it has this bright pop of yellow that just really brings a lot of zing to the garden. So having said that, I will tell you that for many years I put off painting a marigold. I felt overwhelmed by it. I felt like there's so many little delicate, tiny little petals that are all stacked up on top of each other. I didn't know how to approach it. And so I worked really hard to learn how to paint it and figure it out what was the best way to keep it vibrant and yet make it feel like it's coming alive on the canvas. So I'm excited to share some details with you on this and some techniques that maybe will help you. Now, before we get started, I will tell you this is a simple little study. We're not actually painting a painting. The whole purpose of this little mini lesson is to teach you the techniques of painting the marigold. You do some small little studies, and then you can apply it, what you've learned, to your paintings and add marigold to any painting. So let's get started. You're going to need some acrylic paints. I am providing you a list of the colors I use, but I always say don't feel like you have to use those exact colors. You basically need a light yellow, a middle yellow, and of course a little bit darker yellow. One of the colors I will say, if at all possible, a raw sienna is a great one to have. It's what I start the whole painting off with, and it's a nice translucent colors that provides a lot of good base for the painting. So let's get started. I'm excited and I cannot wait to see what you do with this. So today we're going to be painting a marigold, which is just a simple, cheerful little flower. I have here my palette all ready to go. I'll show you, get an idea of what that's looking like. I usually have my lightest colors and then slowly get darker as I go around. I want to use a variety of yellows, and so I've lined my yellows up lightest to darkest. And then there will be a little bit of an orange in the center, but most of our first layer will start off with this lovely caramely color. It's called a raw sienna, and it has a nice translucency to it, which is why I like to use it for the bottom layer. And then of course for a brush, I'm going to begin with a small flat. I will switch to an even smaller round for the details, but this small flat's going to do me nicely to lay the base color in. So I'm going to get my raw sienna, come in here, and instead of laying the brush flat, I'm going to tilt it up a little bit and just start some little skinny little brush strokes, almost like when you're a kid and you're making snowflakes. I'm going to come around and make a nice rounded shape, as big as I want it. I will make this one pretty close to life size of a marigold, just so that I can make sure that you're seeing it on the video. Okay, so this is going to get our basic shape of the flower, and it's going to provide us with some direction. A lot of times that first layer of paint, you're just almost like laying in a map of the direction of the brush stroke. So I'm going to clean my brush off here, get into a little bit of that bright orange. I'm not using much paint on my brush. If you can see here, there's really not a lot on there. And I'm going to again kind of go up on the edge, and just in the center here, provide a little bit, might have gotten a little too much paint on there, provide a little bit of depth of color. And I'll bring that orange out here and there in the little gaps between the raw sienna. I don't want a ton of orange, especially the further I go out. And most of that orange will be covered up here soon. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush off again. And now I'm going to switch to just this nice yellow ochre. It's probably the darkest of my true yellows. It's almost a mustardy color. And I'm going to come in here, and again, whenever I have little gaps, I'm going to come in and lay down some of that yellow ochre, that mustardy yellow. dark mustard, I guess. I'm going to bring it in a little bit into that orange. It's kind of close to the raw sienna, but it is not as translucent. So I'm going to bring it out on the edge even. Wipe my brush off. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and switch. Now that I have the basic shape of the flower in, some of the lower levels or lower layers, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a little bit more of a defined brush. And I'm going to get this nice golden yellow. And again, I'm going to come in. If I see that there is a gap, I will fill it with that. And I hope you can see this on the camera. They're very close to the same colors. And I'm going a little thicker on my paint. What that's doing is it's going to start to drag the different colors together so that I get even more dimension of color. But I need the paint a little bit thicker so it stands out a little bit from the darker yellows that I used. So this is one of those flowers where you really have to trust the process, because it's going to feel like, what in the world? There's no way this is going to turn into anything. It just looks blah. But trust the process and keep going. I do want a few little marks in the middle on that orange. You don't want the orange to be bare. Okay, and I'm just going to wipe my brush. I will touch the tip of it, just the tip, into the water, and I'll go with more of my straight up primary yellow color that I have. And this is where we're going to start to see some dimension. Again, I definitely do want to go thicker on my paint. I really want to lay it in here now because I'm starting to build up those layers. So if I start to pick up too much of those lower colors, I will quite often wipe my brush off on my paper towel to get that excess off. That's a little too thick. You can see I picked up some orange, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off and reload with that primary yellow. I do see that we are starting to get that cheerful look of a marigold going, which makes me happy. And just keep going around. I try not to stay in one area for too long. Sometimes people like to work around almost like a little clock around the whole thing a little at a time. I like to kind of move around because otherwise I find I end up doing one area, I overdo it with the colors. Okay, now that I have this second to last brightest yellow, I'm going to wipe it clean. It's kind of gone through all the color phases. I'm going to wipe it clean, and then I'm actually going to go back to my orange and reestablish this center now that I have a finer brush. I don't want to use very much paint on my brush for this one. I'm just going to kind of define in between some of those center petals. So I'm going in between where I've painted especially that last color of yellow, and just defining those petals ever so slightly. And I will not take this all the way out to the end. I pretty much just want the middle to have that little bit of yellow, or excuse me, orange. And as I'm going to be adding more layers, I do recognize that some of that orange is going to go away. So I'm not going to worry about it being pretty bold at this point. And then the very center, I really want to be bold. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush off, and I think I'm going to go back to my original caramely raw sienna and just get a couple little definitions in here. So this is when you have a flower that has got so many defined little petals, the key here is just knowing you're going to add layer upon layer, and you're probably going to revisit some of these bottom layers again and again. Bottom layer colors, I should say. Okay. And I'm going to skip over my yellow ochre. It's close enough to this, I can skip it on the second layer. So I wiped my brush clean, and now I'm going to go to just this kind of golden yellow. And again, I'm going back to nice thick paint. And I'm just going to try to go overlap and go in between and over what I've already done with nice thick paint. Look how thick that paint is. You don't want to hold back on this. I always think at this point, when this painting is dry, even if it's a little steady like this, I want to be able to, with acrylics, run my hand across it and feel the little bumps. Just a few more of these. You can see it's all kind of turning one color now again here and kind of getting blah. So I don't want to do too much. I'm going to wipe my brush clean, get into that nice, plain, bright, normal primary yellow. Start laying that in, knowing again that it's going to pick up a little of the other colors, and that's okay. But I'm making sure that I'm sticking to the direction of the brush stroke that is going to feel like the hands of a clock, because it's got that roundness to it. So the petals are going to lay in a round way. Okay, now it's time to really get some definition. We're now going to wipe our brush clean, and I'm going to get into the lemon yellow, which is the lightest yellow that we have. Might be a little too much paint. And I'm going to start carefully setting that on here and there for some real definition. You should still be able to see a little bit of that original raw sienna peeking through from the bottom. You don't want to completely cover it up, but this is what's going to give you your definition, is when you can see layer upon layer upon layer of these gorgeous yellows. It starts to build up the colors and build up the dimension really nicely. I want to bring that close to that center without covering up the total red that's in, or orange that's in the middle. So our goal is to kind of make it feel like almost like a starburst or a fireworks shooting out from the middle and getting wider and wider. We should start to see that now as the colors and dimensions are being established. Okay, and then to add even more dimension, I'm going to wipe my brush clean. I'm not going to wash it. I want a little yellow on there, but I'm going to get into my white. And I'm just going to choose a few spots. It's going to look very white at first. Bear with me, it'll tone down. As I move through here, it should start picking up some of the yellow underneath and make that a lighter yellow as opposed to a bright white. And anytime it goes all the way back to yellow, I'll just pick up a little more white. We can really start to see the dimensions really building up. This is where it really starts to get exciting. Now I'm going to stop for a moment, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to add some greenery around the edges so you can really start to see the definition of the leaves. So I have like a dark sap green, and I have like a light lime green or chartreuse green. Just going to come in here, and I want to come in with the sharp part in between those. Need to pick up a little bit more water. There's some little bumps. Those little bumps of the canvas peeking through tell me I need more water on my brush, just a little bit more, so the paint will flow better. So I want to come in wherever the leaf is. I want to make sure that I'm bringing it in around these little petals. I don't want to, because the whole goal is to define the petals. So this is a mixture of those two colors, those two greens. I'm going to turn this so it's easier for me to pull out. And this will help, I think, tremendously to start seeing the definition. And I believe they're a little bit spiky on the edges. So the further out I get, the more of just the light green I'm loading. And then I'm going to wipe my brush. I'll just get the dark green for over here, because we're going to say the light's going to kind of hit from that side. So this side's going to be a little darker. And I'm going to flip that around so I can get some real definition pulling between those petals. And we'll do another one. We'll do another one right here, kind of coming out this way. And I'm just going to draw a line to kind of help me to see what direction it's going to go. And then I'll start laying in that mixture of the two, dark green and chartreuse green. It just helps me to kind of see where it's going to lay when I have that middle line, even though in the end I really am not going to see it much. And then I would like these two to overlap, and so I'm going to grab a little bit of the chartreuse green and a little bit of white. And I'm going to pull those over the other leaf so that I can see this is the one sitting on top. And I'm going to go ahead and also bring a little bit of that white and chartreuse green over into the light side of this leaf. And of course I could cover this with tons of leaves, and I could cover it with the background color, but we're keeping it simple for this little mini lesson just to give you an idea. This is just a little study. So we'll keep it simple. Coming in with just chartreuse green, not all the way to the edges though, because I want those edges to be nice and bright. And don't be afraid to constantly turn your canvas in whatever direction works best for you. I wiped my brush. I'm going to come in here and darken up that bottom leaf on this side a little bit. And then I'll wipe my brush and add a little bit of that chartreuse and white. Oops, got still a little too much of the dark on there. So we'll add the chartreuse and the white to the top one. So always light colors are going to come make it feel like they're closer to the viewer's eye. So this light color up against the dark color tells us that this leaf is sitting on top of this one over here. And finally in the middle here, I just need some mixture of the two. And this guy over here needs to be a little bit darker on this side, doesn't he? Okay, don't want to spend too much time with the leaf. I can get caught up and just really go to town, but we'll keep it simple. Okay, wash my brush off really well. By doing that leaf also, I let this set up a little bit. It's not going to be completely dry because the paint's pretty thick, but enough that we can start adding more definition. So I'm going to return to the mid color of gold that I had. It's kind of that yellow gold. And I want to come in here over some of this green and maybe pick up a little bit of the green. Believe it or not, it kind of softens your edges a little bit just to pick up some of that under green on it. And carry it around here a little bit. And again, I'm keeping my paint pretty thick. And this side, of course, we said the sun is going to come down from this way, so these up here need to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to grab not quite my lemon yellow, but I'm going to grab my kind of primary yellow for now. And again, I don't want to stay in one area too long or I tend to overdo it. So I'll come back to the light area and to find that more. Let's pick up our lemon yellow, which is our lightest yellow, and come in here for some real depth. Now, if at any time I feel like the darker, more in-depth colors start to fade away and it all becomes a little too one-colored, one dimensioned, I can always come back in here and grab like this. This is that yellow ochre. I can always grab that, or I can grab my original raw sienna and I can place it here and there to add more depth to it. I can even add a little orange if I really felt like I needed to. So again, this is where we say we're trusting the process. We're going to keep at it, keep adding those layers, not sticking too much in one area for too long. Add just a little bit more of the orange here. Sometimes it can be a real back and forth, you know? You feel like you just added a color and then the next color takes it away. You got to add a little bit more back. Just keep working at it. It'll come around. Okay, adding that, I'm going to add a little bit more of that caramely yellow ochre, or excuse me, yellow raw sienna over here, because this is going to be my shadow side. So it naturally would be a little darker. And I'm always looking for adding it in between where I feel like petals have been formed, because those darker colors are going to really give it the depth if we do that. Okay, wiping my brush nice and clean. I'm going to come back in with just my primary yellow now, and I'm going to look for areas where I can lay that nice and thick and get some definition, especially on the edges. So notice our little marigold is getting a little bit bigger than we originally had made it. Just know that it's going to, and so the plan should always be for that. We just tend to make things go a little bigger. Okay, I'm going to grab some lemon yellow and add a good amount of white to it so I have a very pale yellow. And I'm going to come in here with very thick paint. Whoops, that's a little too white. It is on the light side, but... And I'm going to try to really get some small, delicate little brush strokes. There we go. Even some that kind of pop into the leaf a little bit here. Do you grow marigolds in your garden? I always try to grow them right outside the studio door. I have a little cutting garden that my husband made for me. It's like a raised flower bed. And I always try to grow marigolds there. I never cut them, even though it's a cutting garden. But I just love how happy they look. And they look so beautiful up against, I usually do like a blue salvia. They look so beautiful up against the blue salvia. Okay, I'm looking for places where perhaps in the process of creating this, we've added so much paint it's like flattening it out. I'm looking for those places, and at this point I'm taking my golden yellow, which is like my mid yellow color, and I'm pretty much just setting it on there. I'm hardly painting it at all because I really want this nice and thick. And just kind of going back and forth between those two lightest yellows, the mid yellow, the lemon yellow, and then of course that golden yellow, with some nice thick brush strokes to really clarify the texture of a marigold. All right, I'm liking it. I think what I'm going to do to finish it off is I'm going to come in with a background color, which maybe I should have started off that way. But I'm going to do a background color so you can really see the definition of those beautiful petals. I'm adding a little bit of white here and there to my yellow just to kind of get some clarification, and then I'll call it good. So I'll show you a picture of the final little study with the background color, and you can kind of see how that really will bring it to light and bring the definition that it really needs. Okay, so now that I have the background completed, you can see, I thought I'd zoom it down here so you could see it a lot closer. You can see how the definition just kind of bounces out of that beautiful marigold now that it has the dark background. I do want to come in here and kind of clarify these edges a little bit more. You know, you can do a background at the beginning of the painting and paint over it, or you can do this where you paint the painting or the little study in our case, and then you come back in and you clarify. If you're going to do the background like this at the end, you're going to have to come back in though and add your little details on the edges and really make sure that edge is overlapping your background a little bit in order for it to avoid that kind of cut and paste look. Need a little bit of dark definition in there. There we go. So I'm just coming back in and trying to make sure that, yeah, that I bring those colors of yellow right out into the green, and it's even, or kind of a turquoise green, and it's even okay to pick up a little bit of that background color in there. What that does is that it's going to soften your edges so that they're not, again, you don't want to cut and paste kind of feel. You want to make it feel like down in there. I love how that pulled some of that green into our flower. Especially on the dark side, that's just a wonderful thing to have happen. And this is our darker side because I've twisted it, because it really softens it up a little bit here. And if it does it too much, I can always come back in with my background color, which I've loaded now, and pull it back towards the flower to get my definition again. It's really up to you how you want it to look, but I love that softness there, so I don't want to do it too much. It's going to soften that a little bit. And then of course on the leaf, it's the same thing. We do need to define the leaf and bring it into that background a little bit. It's a little bit lighter here. And now that we have the background, it really makes the leaf even pop out even more on those edges that we lightened up a little bit. Come in with some nice white, and then I'll come back over that, pull in with chartreuse green right over the white. Should make it nice and light. And just soften it with a little bit of dark pulled in there. Oops, that's a little too much. There we go. Kind of push and pull that a little bit. And on this side again, making sure that the edges go into the background and that there isn't those little white gaps necessarily, making it look like a cut and paste. All right, overall I'm really liking this. Got a sweet little marigold. Pull a little bit of yellow into that. I almost got a little too green there. Sweet little marigold, cheering up any kind of painting, and doing these little studies really helps you learn how to paint whatever thing that you want to add to your painting. You know, we don't always have to do a masterpiece. It's nice to just have little studies where we're learning, and they turn out adorable. All right, thanks for joining me, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you tune in now for my next paint class, which is painting sunflowers in acrylics. It becomes available on March 1st. It will be on my website, juliakulish.com.